Well, we'll move on with our class, and we're talking about the messages to the seven churches. And to remind everybody, these, instead of just being messages to seven physical churches back in that day, they are really messages to disciples about how to move from the point where they first get that impression that there's something out there they're supposed to be doing. They get that impression and they break off from outer authorities and they go the 7 steps that we have covered. And we're on the 7th step. And on the 7th step, the guy figures he's reestablished some soul contact. In the 7 steps, he kind of loses contact with the soul, and then he regains it, he loses it, regains it, and then finally on the 7th he thinks, I got it made now. I've focusing on the kingdom of God within myself, focusing on the soul, and he thinks, man, I got it made. Where was his mistake in thinking this? This is where he gets correction, and he thinks he's going to get a message from his soul like this: well done, my good and faithful servant, welcome into the kingdom of God and to the presence of your master, and all this type of stuff. He's expecting a big pat on the back because he thinks he's finally arrived and at the end of the journey. But he gets a big wake-up call. Instead of getting a pat on the back, what happens?
He gets chewed out.
Yeah, he gets chewed out. And as we covered last week, the famous verse was, I would that thou were hot or cold, but because if you're just lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. So in other words, he's told at this time, man, you think you got it made, and you're up here, you're at this point, and you think you can just relax? No. You completely all screwed to smithereens on this. If you want to go any further, you have to prepare yourself for a great journey, a great effort. And you have to be full of fire toward the right-hand path. Otherwise, you're in danger of the left-hand path. And this is where we get to the point where Curtis is going to go over Revelations 3:17. He's been given a number of corrections here. And we left off in the middle of the corrections, and now Curtis is going to cover Revelations 3:17, where he's told how to solve some of the problems here.
Well, yeah, he's been told, you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out, because the seekers become complacent. And he thinks he's got it all together and he can rest on his laurels. And here the voice says, because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods, and have no need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. So here's the disciple. He's rich on many levels. Physically, he applies the keys of manifesting that he's learned along the way, and he has lots of stuff. Nice house, probably a car or two, a boat, some possessions. So, he's pretty well financially. Physically, he's given up most of his bad habits. So he thinks he's got that pretty well mastered. Emotionally, he's pretty stable, has control of his passions like anger, guilt, irritation, frustration. He feels pretty emotionally stable. Mentally, he's read a lot of books, been to classes, knows a lot more than the average person. He's abandoned organized religion, and he sees himself ahead of the crowd. He thinks he's spiritually superior. to those people around him. He's ahead of the game. He might even think, oh man, I'm so advanced. This is my last life on this planet. And
How often do we hear that from people? Well, I'm on my last life.
I hear that a lot, from people. And I go, well, yeah, but can you walk on water? Can you heal the sick? There's still a lot left to be done, but they, want to move on. It's that glamour. It's a glamour. So at this point, the seeker has plateaued. He's reached an apotheosis. He thinks he can kick back, take it easy. He feels complete within himself. And basically, his arrogance has sucked him in. He's learned a little and thinks he is wise, but he is not. Now he gets knocked off of his lofty pedestal with a strong slap in the face. He's called wretched, miserable, poor, blind, naked. Wow, this is quite a wake-up call to the average seeker to be called all these things when he thinks he's got it all together. So in reality, he's in denial of the next step that he's supposed to be taking and what's really required of him. He's blind to the inner vision of his soul. He's really poor because all the goods that he's accumulated can be taken away just like that. One good fire will do it. Plus, the soul doesn't care about material acquisitions anyway. It just cares about the expansion of consciousness of his shadow or reflection. So he's also poor in the riches of the spirit and the greater blessings that his soul has to offer as he takes his next step, which of course will require courage and effort. And, taking your next initiation is not easy. In this book that we're going through in our triad, Initiation, Human and Solar, the Tibetan says, initiation is profoundly difficult of attainment and calls for a strenuous discipline of the entire lower nature and a life of self-efficacing and self-abnegating devotion. So you have to forget yourself and deny yourself and basically enter the realm of service and listen to what your soul has to say. So it's not easy. He even says, I've struggled and wrestled my way into a greater measure of light than has the average disciple that will read these words. So pay attention. So the seeker stands naked. He's called naked. He's naked before his inner Christ, where all stands revealed. He has no secrets from himself, really. He's done some good in the world, but not nearly enough. He's been weighed in the balances and found wanting. When he sees where he really stands upon the path of enlightenment, he feels wretched and miserable because he thinks he's further ahead than he really is. He can't really perform any great miracles, can't even, like we mentioned earlier, can't walk on water, can't do all the things that, he thought he could do or wanted to do. So his ignorance stands revealed, basically. He wakes up as he realizes that now he must do more if he is to achieve his next initiation, knowing that there is always a next step to be taken upon the path of liberation.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, real good, Curtis. Thanks a lot. I might just add one thing, is that his inner voice didn't spare any words with him and treated him, gave him very stern instructions here. And in the first 6 steps, the voice was quite a bit more gentle. What's interesting about this is that thinking, now why was the voice more gentle with the guy earlier? And now as he actually gets on the threshold, I mean, he really gets pounded. So why is that? And the reason is that he's finally reached a point where he's overcome his ego to the point where he can handle it. Before, he couldn't handle the harsh criticism. So the inner voice was very gentle and just prodding him forward and correcting him in gentleness. And now he's at a point of the threshold, the point of the great decision. So the inner voice, the inner Christ says, I'm not going to take it easy on you any longer. I'm just going to tell you exactly the way it is, because either you can handle it now or you can't handle it. So you have to be able to handle what I have, the pure, raw truth about yourself and where you are. So that's interesting, is that when you're working with people, as you in the group become teachers, you will find this when you work with people, how fragile their egos are. You have to treat them very gently when they're committing an error. If you just come out and say, hey, you really screwed up, I mean, they will sometimes get so mad that they will never talk to you again. I mean, so you have to treat them very gently. You have to read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and really treat them with a lot of finesse so that they don't get mad and don't come back. And so this is the way the soul treated the guy in the beginning. And now he reaches the point to where it's make or break. The soul says, I'm going to come out. And
Okay, another thing.
The way it is, yeah.
Yeah, well, the average ego is, like you say, fragile. They'll shatter like glass if you tell them what you see. When I did this group called Nexus in California, we went to the Poconos, and there were probably 40 of us, and we divided into squads of 6. And at some point during the week, and I remember I think we spent like $3,000 or $4,000 a person to be here, so we have an investment. And at some point during the week, each person takes a turn going into the center, and everyone on the outside can say what they see, what they've learned about this person during the week, and good and bad. And now they don't pull any punches. They might say, well, the reason you're so fat is because you're lazy. And the person, oh, well, I didn't want to hear that, but they're going to hear it. And the next person will say, yeah, we see your problem, but we can help you fix it. And at some point, the person might want to leave the circle, but they don't let him out. They hold him in the circle, and he has to hear everything that the people on the outside have to say about him. And then in the end, he might break down and start crying or whatever, but he lets it all in, and then he can see the truth of where he really is. But it takes a group to really, unless you're really connected to your soul and can hear that inner voice, it takes an external voice to really set you straight and tell you where you're at.
Yeah, and even in a group like that, you got to be careful. But when you have a personal relationship with somebody, then you have to be even more careful sometimes, because the closer you get to somebody, the easier it is to offend them.
JJ.
And, yeah.
To your point about the soul speaking the unvarnished truth and having to be careful, I know you're familiar with this, but for others who aren't, the discipleship in the New Age books, where DK had a group that he was instructing.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, in the beginning, he says something like, I will speak with frankness to you. And so he just lays it out like, oh, you're being too much this way. He has encouraging things to say too, but he just tells them like, you're too much on this and you need to go like this. And, they were a somewhat advanced group of people, but, even some of them got offended and, stuff like that.
Right. And when they didn't like what DK said, they accused Alice A. Bailey of just making it up and not having real contact with DK.
Did that really happen? I wasn't aware of. I guess we don't see the.
I read that somewhere. That Yeah, they were, when, I think it was Alice A. Bailey made some comment on that in some talk she gave that, somewhere she made it, that, yeah, that when they didn't like what correction DK gave them, then they just figured Alice A. Bailey was just making it up because she had something against them.
Well, there you go. Dorte typed something in the chat. She wanted to say something, by the way.
You want to say something, Dorothy?
No, that was earlier. You caught me quite instantly, actually. It was just I think Joshua mentioned that I was just, if I wanted to interrupt you, I should just do it. So
Yeah,
I know that now. Thank you. It's okay. Yeah.
okay. Anything else you want to say? As long as we got you.
No, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm listening. So
Okay. Well, real good. Let's go to Mr. Nick. He's going to cover the next verse for us. Hope you had enough time, Nick. I forgot to send you the material till last night.
This is the thing. I've been thinking about the verse itself before you sent me that. So I have there's kind of two strands to it. So there's my original thinking, and then there's the commentary that you sent me. So I could try to just kind of go over both, I guess.
Sure.
So it's Revelations 3:18, and it reads, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear. And anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. So there's three basic parts of that, the gold and the raiment, the clothes, and the eye salve. So I kind of break them down that way. First, I guess, I'll read what the commentary says about the first part. So it says that, gold tried in the fire is a symbol of great spiritual struggle, that, he was deceived into thinking he could relax and just go with the flow and attain liberation that way, but he has to, really motivate himself. And that's, similar to where I went with it first. Like it's gold. I had to kind of look up, the phrasing was a little confusing to me. Gold tried in the fire, but it just means gold that's been refined of all its flaws, basically, in a fire. So the way I tended to look at it, I mean, obviously, I think it's referring to, exposing yourself to trials and being purified by that. But I think also, because I connected it to what, the previous part where it talks about, would that thou were hot or cold, and because you're lukewarm, I spit thee out. And I think it has to do with the fact that, when you're decisive and when you decide on one thing, even if things might be more complicated, the nuances that you sense are there become more clear to you if you just decide to go with something and pursue it and, put up with whatever challenges or trials come from that. And so there's these, one interpretation of the flaws, I guess, is that, you can have this view of something where you think you're not hot or cold because you think it's more complicated or more nuanced, but you don't, because you don't actually have an exact understanding of what those nuances are, or of the whole picture that you're looking at, then it's actually, those nuances almost represent ignorance more than knowledge. And you have to get the knowledge by just sort of understanding the best you can and moving forward with that understanding. If that makes any sense. But yeah, it's like, so you have to, what was I going to say? That it's you have to see your own ignorance. That's the main thing, is that you can see that the situation is complicated, and that can kind of paralyze people and make them indecisive or not really choose one opinion or the other. But if you see that, you're at a certain level and, you don't know everything yet, and you have to, the best you could do is to move forward with something you can be relatively, sure about, then with that awareness of yourself, you can actually make some progress.
Okay.
And so that goes into the next part, which is about the white raiments, that you have to have, what's the exact thing? White raiment that thou mayst be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear. And so I think, clothes in a way is a symbol of being self-aware. And especially you have to be self-aware when you're wearing white clothes, because, get stuff on them and they get ruined. I mean, I don't even mean that as a joke, because he earlier in that, in this part of Revelations, he mentions white clothing as sort of symbolic of, being capable of wearing white clothing is like being capable of keeping up with, of living up to divine values and stuff. So the white raiment, well, I'll say, like, in the commentary that you sent me, it mentions that white is a symbol of synthesis as well as purity. And that part of the implication is that, he has to not only live up to high standards, but to see the whole picture and understand that, there are going to be other people working towards the good that seem very different from him. And, they may seem to have different sensibilities or opinions, but they're still working for the good. And so there's the synthesis part of it, that you have to be able to acknowledge people that seem dissimilar to you, but that are still.
Right. So in other words, if the guy just sees a part of the picture, it's like he's naked because he's not fully clothed with the whole raiment, like wearing just going out in your underwear. Okay, go ahead there, Nick.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, that was, and I also I connected that, like I said, to like what we need to be aware of is our own ignorance. Like when you become aware, it's like the first thing you become aware of is you're not aware, right? Like in Garden of Eden, that's the sort of the first place the symbolism of clothing was used, right? They weren't aware, and then they realized, oh, I'm naked. I'm not, I need to be aware how I'm presenting myself.
Well, you ever have a dream where you're in the middle of a meeting or something and you're just in your underwear? That's kind of funny example of how the guy really is, and maybe that's a sign of our soul telling us that, hey, we need to be more inclusive.
Yeah, so yeah, that was that. And then the last part is anoint thine eyes with eye salve that thou mayest see. And in my thinking, that was sort of, I mean, the clothing and the eye salve was sort of like, to me, it just connected what I was saying about the gold, right? Refining the gold being sort of a refinement of your yourself, having the self-awareness to say, okay, I'm gonna like pick something and move forward with it because I'm not capable of seeing everything right now. And so you have the self-awareness, and moving forward then corrects your vision, and takes some of the flaws off of the gold. But also there's the additional stuff from the commentary that you sent me, which I guess, actually I could just read it. So before one can see, he must first realize that his vision is impaired. The seeker thought he was seeing fine and is at first disappointed at how blind he has been. Now he must purchase eye salve from God to really see. Eye salve soothes the eyes and is a symbol of the inner peace that comes with true vision. If the seeker follows the direction of the peace that passes understanding, he will be led to true vision.
Okay, real good, Nick. Appreciate both you and Curtis participating. And then he ends with this. He follows, and as many as I love. In other words, the voice is kind of having a little sympathy for the guy. Well, I've been kind of rough on him, so let me explain why I'm a little bit rough on you. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. And remember, the word repent means to change direction, is what the root of the word means. So if you're going east and you're supposed to be going west, well, it won't do any good to continue to go east. You have to stop and turn around and go the right direction. That's what the word repent basically means. So in some ways, the guy has, even though he thinks he's arrived, he's kind of aware of the voice of the soul. So he thinks he's on easy street now. But there's still a number of corrections that need to be made, and he's finally tough enough and got enough independence from his fragile ego to be able to hear the voice of the soul in its purity. And he says, I really love you, and if I didn't love you, I wouldn't be seeking to correct you and set you on the right path. So the master applies kind of tough love to the seeker because he loves him. Probably don't have time to cover the next verse. The next verse is a very pivotal one. And we'll just make one assignment on that one, since it may take a little time. And I think a good couple to pick on would be Adam and Marnie. Are you going to be here next week, Adam?
All things being well.
Would you like to take Revelation 3:20 to 22?
Why, Marnie would love to. We need to hear from him.
Yeah, we're signing both of you, by the way. So don't let him take all the glory there, Marnie.
Okay.
Okay, do you have the text, or do I need to send it to you on the interpretation?
We got it.
We got it.
Okay, great. So so we will have you guys give us your thoughts on that next week. And any other comments or questions before we sign off?
Last week you were going to send me an invoice so I could buy the book from you, and I never.
Oh,
got it.
yeah, I was. I'm sorry about that, Ed. You should have reminded me.
He is.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. And
I was gonna mention that the talk about clothing reminded me of when I lived in Stella, Illinois, which was supposedly all based on this the white brotherhood philosophy and whatnot. Secretly, all of the members knew the location of a secret gin clear skinny dipping hole.
really?
And you could go there, on a weekend or something, like a Saturday maybe, and you'd see kids at the breast, you'd see grandmas, you'd see all different past religions and races and all that, all this in skinny dipping naked with each other.
Must have been an interesting experience. Yeah, there was a number of hot springs here in Idaho that only a handful of people know about. I haven't visited any for a long time, but I imagine it's that way in a lot of kind of wilderness areas. There's kind of hidden little places people go to, clothed or unclothed, whatever they choose, I guess. I might have a question to you on Still. Now, Richard wrote, the founder of that organization, he wrote a pretty fascinating book called The Ultimate Frontier, where he talked about meeting with these masters in the physical. And a lot of people who read that book wondered if he made it up, especially when the predictions didn't come true. Then a lot of people begin to question, what's your opinion on that? Do you think he just made the whole thing up, or do you think he really was visited by some entities? What's your opinion, Rick?
It could be, it doesn't really matter where where it came from. It all has to do with what it produced. The fruit of the whole thing was, it didn't really matter if I believe in white masters and what was the other one? Oh, dark mentalists was the bad guys.
Yeah.
And what it came down to is what the community decided they were going to do as far as living peacefully together, and I can never find fault in myself for having been a part of that, because I learned a lot of things about community living with a group of people who are trying to be the best that they can be out in the middle of a cornfield.
Now, I have to give the guy credit, though. He did write a pretty interesting book. It's called The Ultimate Frontier. It's a very fun book to read, no matter what your belief system is. But okay, appreciate everybody being here. Good vibes here, and we will see you next Sunday at 10 o'clock in 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Adjust to your time.
I want to say something about predictions. Those teachers from Spirit are outside of time and space, and sometimes they don't see time as it is. Back in 1972, our teacher, Dr. Frost, had at the end of the year, he always gave us predictions, and he said that it would be the first year that the Pope would resign. But it turned out it wasn't the Pope, it was the president. But anyway, the Pope did eventually resign.
Yeah, one New Year's, as 1 year when New Year's was approaching, we were talking about predictions. So I challenged everyone to make predictions for the coming year. And I told everyone that no one is going to be 100% correct, because you cannot predict the future 100% in the details. But if you pay attention, you can come close. So anyway, mine were pretty close. I made about a dozen different ones and got about 80% correctly. I predicted every single Oscar winner accurately. The only one I got wrong is I predicted Fidel Castro would die, and he lived a couple more years after that event. So that was the only one I got wrong, and I think that was I was kind of hoping he would would die. So it might have been my desire body crept in, making a wrong prediction there. But yeah, this is a mistake a lot of spiritual people make, is they make specific predictions, and everyone I've ever seen do that has been wrong. I haven't seen one be right yet, except maybe 1 out of 20 things they say, something like that. But that's why I'm very sparse about making specific predictions. I've made a couple. One I made starting in the 70s was that a lot of people were predicting Christ was going to come or the end of the world by the year 2000, and I told everyone that wasn't going to happen. And then a lot of people were predicting 2012, and several years before that I said 2012 wouldn't be much different than 2011. And that turned out to be quite accurate. But I'm very very, I haven't made very many because the future is very malleable, but there are some things in the future that are pretty much cyclic and are predictable, but not 100%. Okay, any
Can I
other
say
comments?
something in that
Yeah,
aspect?
sure.
Last week I was working and I met this man, and on his door, I work as a nurse visiting people at their homes. So on the door it said astro.com, and I was thinking, wow, this is interesting. So I went inside and I did my job, and in the meantime we were talking, and I said to him, so what have you been doing with your life since you have this notice on the door? And he said he was working as an astrologer, and I said, oh, that's interesting. So we started talking, and he said to me, he told me, and I was instantly, when he said that, I was thinking about something I read in your book, JJ, because he said in a person's, what do you call it, chart, you can always see that people have three choices, and what they choose is up to the person. You can't predict it. So he said, so it's always interesting when you see someone's chart to see what direction they take, you know?
Right, the astrological influences are pushes and pulls on people, and you can feel internally a push in a certain direction, but you don't have to go that direction. Now, DK makes an interesting comment on this. He says people of low evolution are much easier to predict than people of high evolution, because people on high evolution don't necessarily go with the flow.
Exactly.
They can go against the flow. So they're very hard to predict, whereas people that are just controlled by the flow are much easier to predict.
Okay, that's a nice comment, because I went to this psychic woman. I used her for a couple of years, and then when last time I saw her, she said, "You're wasting your money, daughter, because I can never predict what you do."
Yeah,
That was nice.
you don't always go with the flow, huh?
Never.
And we want to
No.
go with the spiritual flow, but there's two flows. There's the material flow and the spiritual flow. And the material flow is for people that are into the material consciousness, just about always go with it. So it makes them pretty predictable as to what they're going to do. And
the way I got in contact with your books, you have to hear this. It's really amazing. I had this man I'd been living with, and I moved away from him. And then suddenly I just had this feeling I had to go back. And everyone who knows me, they said, Dorothy, you are losing your mind. What are you doing? And I said, I don't know. I just have this feeling that I need to go back. So I did. And something inside me, in my brain said, you can't do this. And my heart was like screaming, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And then I stayed there for about a month. And then he comes to me one day and he says, hey, daughter, you want to read this book? And I have really many books. And I said, so what is it? And he said, I don't know. I haven't read it, but I think it's good. And I started reading it. And I called him because I brought it with me at work when I have this 30 minutes break. And I called him in the middle of reading, and I said, have you read this? And he said, no. And I said, you're stupid. So, and then I went back to my own house, and then I just said, okay, so that was it.
Was that the Immortal?
Sorry?
Was that the Immortal book?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when I came back to my own house after 2 months there, and I was like, okay, so the point was to get the book. And I've done that so many times in my life, Would I do things and then people around me are shaking their heads saying, this is crazy, Dawn. And then afterwards I can look back and always something really amazing happens. So, yeah.
Well, great. Good story.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you with us. And
nice to be here.
We will look forward to seeing everybody next week then, next Sunday at 10 a.m. all being well. Good group.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, and if you choose inner peace, you can stand up against any elephant.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or bear.
Or a lion.